This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Madam President, Commissioners, Members of Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us at what really has become the most important event of the winter social calendar here in Brussels. The almost Oscars, as we like to call it. So as I think most of you know, Politico 28 is not an awards ceremony. It is not intended as an endorsement or an accolade of any kind. You saw Vladimir Putin on the list, so you know that. It is a list of the 28 most powerful people in European politics and policy for the coming year, as decided by our journalists in consultation with a wide array of sources and power players. It is purely a reflection of power and influence, be it virtuous or malign. This is not an easy list to compile every year. With multiple, often competing power centers, influence here in Europe can be diffuse, muted, and contested. And that's one reason why we think this list is so important. We split our finalists every year into three categories: the doers, the dreamers, and the disruptors. Doers hold formal power to get things done in Europe. Disruptors are poised to upend the status quo, and dreamers represent ideas that are shaping power and politics. We actually have three people from this year's Politico 28 list with us this evening. Elke van den Brandt is the Transport Minister for Brussels, who is trying to get cars off the road, so thank you, Madam Transport Minister. Thierry Breton is European Commissioner for the European Internal Market. And Bjorn Seibert is Head of Cabinet for Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. This year, we also asked our audience to tell us who they would choose to top our list. Here is a snapshot on the screen of some of their responses. It's a great honor to have some of our, well, there will be in a minute. You'll see. It's a great honor to have some of our senior Politico colleagues from the United States with us here tonight, including the founder of Politico, John Harris, and his wife, Anne O'Hanlon. In a little bit, Ryan Heath will interview Julianne Smith, the US Ambassador to NATO, after which our Brussels Playbook author, Jacob Hanke-Weller, will interview Thierry Breton. I've now been the editor-in-chief of Politico Europe for just over a year. I'm so proud of what this organization and all my hardworking colleagues have achieved in the short time that Politico Europe has been around. And I'm filled with anticipation for what we will do next. Politico plays an indispensable role, not only in keeping the world informed about politics in Europe, but also in holding power to account in this town. I know for sure, and personally, that a free and thriving press is something our first guest speaker also feels very strongly about. So without further ado, I'd like to ask President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, to join me here on the stage, please. Madam President.
Good evening, everyone.
So, it's wonderful to see you.
Happy to
Thank
be
you
here.
so much for doing this. We've all seen the cost of living crisis, refugees from Ukraine, a Europe that is running out of ammunition, we even have European voices that start to say that this is America's war on the Kremlin. And what is it, why should we support this, continue to support this? So I want to ask you, how much appetite do you think there is in Europe to stay the course and to carry on supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression?
I'll start by saying, first of all, we have no choice. Secondly, anybody who thinks that they can extricate or exonerate themselves from responsibility over making sure this war ends and that Ukraine wins has not been on the ground fighting what is essentially a decision by one country to illegally invade another. I'm part of a generation that doesn't know war, that grew up with taking borders or the absence of them for granted. But now is our moment as a Europe to continue doing what we've done since the 24th of February, building on the unity that I thought we would never manage to see, finding agreement on sanctions that I thought we would not manage to achieve, and still saying we need more aid, we need more financial, military, practical help. I don't feel that fatigue hitting us. If anything, I feel a strengthened resolve to make sure that war does not remain on our continent that we hold so dear.
So you think that Europe will hold together in the face of Russian aggression, that Europe, despite the fact that there are tensions with the United States, that people do complain here that it's not really our war, we should help to end it rather than help to prolong it?
Yeah, of course, end of a war is always what we should aim for. But at what cost? I think the quickest, fairest way would be for Russia to leave Ukraine, because it took the territory of that country for its own. And also, when we talk about peace, what do we mean by peace? I think when we talk about peace, it has to be with freedom, with dignity, with security, not with blackmail or a gun pointed in one direction.
Okay. We've only got 15 minutes, and I've got quite a few questions.
Yeah,
so
I can see you looking at the clock.
I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, I want to keep pushing it, but I want to also get on to some of our other questions.
I can talk about this for 15 minutes.
Yeah. Sure. So we just published an investigation today into a French former champion of digital privacy. I don't expect you to have read the whole thing because it's quite long, but this person used to be a champion of digital privacy, but now runs a cyber surveillance company, compiling reports on individuals based on their online personas and selling these to governments and potential employers, companies, governments. How worried are you about this phenomenon of cyber surveillance, of private actors scrolling through our social media posts, anything we've done on the internet, and then selling that information, packaging, even if it's stuff that we've put out there, maybe when we were younger, when we were maybe a little more foolish? How worried are you about this phenomenon? What can Europe do about it? What can the EU do about it?
Well, the European Parliament has been a strong advocate for making sure that that line between freedom of expression and fundamental rights of what you do, whether online or offline, is kept in check. And not, let's say, the balance between that freedom and privacy and the way our laws, sometimes having been adopted too late, happy to hear Thierry Breton on this later, but holding, let's say, our clients as legislators to account, but also holding ourselves to account. Let me make it clear. I am extremely concerned about the way threats evolve in the current world. You know, we don't only fight war on the ground, we fight war by countering misinformation and narratives. I'm not only worried about the scrutiny or cyber, let's say, targeting by private actors, but also by public actors. I am well aware of the backsliding of what is acceptable in this country, in this union, even beyond what can be declared as legal or illegal, into what should be done and what is ethical and morally acceptable in countries that we insist there being democracies, because that's what the EU is made up of, 27 democratic states.
So the other thing, question that I think our piece has raised was, here is a person who founded Quant, the French Google, as it was known for a little while, and is now sort of involved in this murky world. It really raises for us, I think, the question of why does Europe not yet have, apart from, let's say, Spotify, true technological champions that can kind of compete with Silicon Valley, China, other places? What is it? What's the problem?
If 2023 will not be the year of competitiveness, then I think, you know, we would not be able to look back at this mandate. I'm a politician, I work with mandates. At this mandate as having been one where we did not only manage by crisis. We've been talking about creating a Silicon Valley in Europe for years. The one industry we're still leading in is the creative industry. Every other industry we're not leading in anymore.
Legislation.
Now, what do we
lead
do?
in legislation.
We
The
always
Silicon
lead.
Valley of regulation.
We love legislation. But sometimes we don't, but we push back a little bit. But we always ask for more, and then we're the ones who complain, so let me not also play that role. I think that if we don't recognize our place, but also perhaps not go down a slippery road of who goes to the very bottom of the protectionist race. So this is also a discussion we're having now. We are at a time of state interventionism, but at what cost? At removing competitiveness, at stalling growth, while at the same time we need that interventionism in order to ensure growth. And the regulatory framework is key to that, but then also how we allow our individual member states to thrive in a year when we were supposed to focus on economic recovery. And as a result, in a post-pandemic scenario, inflation is so high that it's wiping value off assets and targeting whole chunks of our populations into thinking, how can I get to the end of the month? So I think that we need to become competitive again. We need to understand what the word competitive is. And we need to underpin that with a value set that is important and dear for us. And that is where perhaps we are better at doing that than the rest of the world, where I was asked by a journalist 2 weeks ago, is the concept of democracy becoming rarer and rarer? And that's quite true, actually. Sometimes we think, you know, Europe is the center of the world. But at the end of the day, the world is not so large. We have not worked together with our Asian partners enough. So many trade deals are still outstanding on the table. Where are we? Why don't we lead those debates rather than whine? I read one of our articles saying exactly that, so that one I read.
Nice. You say this, but it looks like we're entering a subsidy war between the US and the EU. So where is the money going to come from for the EU to fight this subsidy war?
Well, the European Parliament is asking for a complete revision, not review, you know, this is Euro talk for a change. Complete revision of the multi-annual financial framework. What we went with during the pandemic, Next Generation EU, digital and green transition, but also increase of own resources. If we don't start actually finding new resources, then the Next Generation EU is already being eaten away by the debt and the inflation and the interest rates. So we're asking for a complete reapplication of what, in a way, today we're living in, a framework that is not possible to use in the current situation. We've become agile, much more flexible than we've ever been, but we need to recognize that this is working by emergency and not working with a proper perspective of how we can thrive as a union. And that's not only legislation, but also, as you say, where are we going to get the money from? How are we going to, if we talk, I don't want to jump to topics, but talk about our ongoing relation with China when our dependence economically is huge and our industries depend on China so much to the extent that you have some modern machinery can't work without specific raw materials coming from China at 93%. We only produce 1%. The rest is American. Do we enter a subsidy war? I would very much caution against. But I fear when I see an increase in protectionist, let's say, angles, without a big word. I want to look at us competing on our climate goals rather than on how we close our arms and think that that's beneficial, because it's not. And I don't think Europe should enter that race to the bottom. I think we should continue to insist on the fact that our way can work.
I'd love to get into China with you. You and I have talked about it a lot. But 5 minutes. So
You're basically ticking off,
I know,
the
it's
questions
terrible.
that you don't want
It's
me to hear
terrible.
from.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we've written a lot, and very, very critically, I would say, about the process that you followed to appoint the Secretary General of the Parliament. And I know this is a tough question, and I just want to commend you for turning up tonight, because we wrote a lot of mean things about you this year, mostly Jakob. But
Yeah, where is he? I'm looking for
anyone
him.
who's there he is. If any of you have been reading Playbook, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Every morning.
Every morning.
All summer.
So I'm very impressed that you're here, actually, and I commend you on that. I think I'm very impressed. So how do you defend that process, and would you do anything different if you had to do this over?
I thank you for using the word process. I am very proud about how we tackled a big change. Institutions move slowly, and I was faced with a decision of how to engage with the selection of a new Secretary General of a big institution. And I wanted to open it up. So we had, for the first time ever, more than one candidate for the post, who were treated fairly, equally, and at the end of the day, a political group of politicians took a political decision over one candidate. What I would change is I would codify the rules that we set up, I insisted on, in order for us not to have any other civil servant in this town with 3 decades of experience go through what the next Secretary General of the European Parliament went through for this.
So you wouldn't want to just go back to the old system because that'd be much easier and we wouldn't write about it in Politico.
You want to bring Kraus-Weller back?
So,
we can codify the current system. There was no system before.
Thank you. I want to ask you a very direct question. Do you want to be the EU Commission President?
Let's go back to the previous question. Look, this town...
We don't support candidates, by the way. I might give you my personal vote.
Very neutral. This town thrives on speculation, so let me be very clear. Being President of the European Parliament is an amazing honor and responsibility. It's something that I take very seriously, and I will spend every minute of my mandate until the end of it to make sure that more people vote in 2024. I will focus on my own re-election in Malta. I've learned in politics never to expect anything and always be prepared for the unexpected. So that is what will be my focus on. And by the way, we have a Commission President, first woman ever in the role. She's done pretty well.
Doesn't sound like a denial to me. I don't know about you. So.
That's a politician's answer. You ask me a question, I give you an answer. Two minutes left.
I know. I've got 5 more questions at least. So the elections, you mentioned the elections for the European Parliament in 2024. How can you make the European Union, especially this Parliament, relevant for ordinary Europeans? I mean, I talk to ordinary Europeans and they don't really know what the European Parliament is often. And so how do you do that?
I see that. I think the European Parliament could be better, could communicate its role better. When I got elected, and I said that to me, Europe signifies hope and belief. And I said that we should get out of Brussels and Strasbourg and go to capital cities, but not only. Not only take photos, with flags, but actually speak to young people. Even in those countries that are not yet members of the EU, but look to Europe as their home. I did this in Moldova a couple of weeks ago. It was amazing. And I will do that again next week in another country. But we can still do more. We reversed a trend in 2019 that had seen a progressive decrease in voting. That was reversed. And I think this mandate, where we showed that we can be efficient, we can be open, we can be transparent, we can converse with journalists and answer questions, all questions, no matter how difficult they are. That is something that I'm proud of, and I would like the Parliament to be able to achieve that in a better way until 2024. And that's what I'll focus on. I think we can do it. I'm convinced.
Great. Well, we actually at Politico take credit for that rise in, because it was the first election since Politico was set up in Europe. So I think we actually,
that would be great.
here at
Would be
Politico, are
first,
the main reason
first
why...
article pro-parliament you will write,
That's
you know.
right. So,
Very welcome.
Madam President, thank you so much for being a good sport, for coming tonight, and for talking to the world. So
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I have many colleagues here. Thank you. Thanks.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.